We live in a world that tells you intelligence is a fixed trait. You're either gifted or you're not. But what if that belief is the very chain keeping millions of people stuck in mediocrity? Society trains us to measure intelligence by grades, diplomas, and job titles. Yet some of the sharpest minds collapse under stress, while ordinary people who question and adapt often prove far wiser. In an age of information overload, most people think knowing more is the same as being smarter. But what if real intelligence has less to do with knowledge and more to do with how you question, act, and grow every single day? Welcome to StoicCraft, where we bring the timeless wisdom of Stoic philosophy into today's world of chaos, pressure, and endless noise. Here, intelligence isn't about memorizing facts. It's about building resilience, sharpening clarity, and living with unshakable purpose. Have you ever caught yourself thinking, maybe I'm just not smart enough to get what I want? Perhaps you've looked at others who seem sharper, quicker, always getting things right the first time, and wondered why life feels harder for you. That thought alone has crushed the confidence of countless people. But here's the truth that few are willing to admit. Intelligence isn't a gift handed out at birth like eye color or height. It isn't fixed. Intelligence is a skill. And like any skill, it can be trained, strengthened, and expanded if you're willing to do the work. For thousands of years, Stoicism has been a guiding philosophy for warriors, emperors, philosophers, and ordinary men and women trying to survive hardship. It shaped minds not by inflating IQ scores, but by cultivating inner strength, emotional mastery, and self-discipline. You don't need to be a genius to live with wisdom. What you need is a mind that knows where to focus, what to ignore, and how to respond with clarity instead of impulse. That's what Stoic training can give you. In the next lessons, you'll discover 15 powerful Stoic principles that will maximize your intelligence. And by intelligence, I don't mean the ability to memorize trivia or outwit someone in an argument. I mean the ability to live with greater clarity, strength, and purpose, to think more deeply, respond more wisely, and act more effectively in the world. These lessons are not abstract theories. They are battle-tested practices that have carried people through wars, crises, and personal trials for centuries. If you stay with me until the end, you'll encounter a truth so simple, yet so powerful, that it could change the way you see yourself forever. One of the most common illusions people carry through life is the belief that intelligence is static, an invisible lottery ticket stamped at birth. Some people, they assume, are destined to be smart, while the rest must simply make do. But to the Stoics, this idea wasn't just wrong. It was dangerous. They saw it as an excuse, a lazy shield people hide behind to avoid the responsibility of self-improvement. For the Stoics, reason was not a talent. It was a duty. It's the very thing that separates us from animals, and for that reason, cultivating it is a moral obligation. No one is born wise, but everyone is born with the potential to become wise. The real difference between those who see clearly and those who stumble blindly isn't the number of neurons in their brains. It's how often they challenge their own assumptions. The Stoics never glorified genius. They honored disciplined thinking. They respected the slow, deliberate sharpening of the mind, not the flashy bursts of cleverness. And that raises a question worth asking. Have you ever actually tested the limits of your own mind? Or are you living by assumptions about what you think you can or cannot do? Modern science backs the Stoics up. Neuroscience has proven that the brain is constantly rewiring itself in response to challenge. This principle, known as neuroplasticity, means you can learn something new at 40, 60, or even 70 and still alter the physical structure of your brain. Your capacity to grow mentally never expires. That's not just philosophy anymore. That's biology. Think of it this way. The brain is like clay. The more you work it, the more it takes shape. Every time you push yourself to think differently, to ask a hard question, to sit with an uncomfortable idea, you are reshaping that clay. Mental stagnation doesn't come from age. It comes from living too long without challenge. Just as muscles shrink if you never exercise, the mind weakens if you let it rest in comfort. Thinking requires effort. Reflection requires training. And the Stoic doesn't chase comfort, they chase sharpness. That's why they wrote daily, questioned themselves constantly, and examined their own thoughts with relentless honesty. They didn't trust their first impulses because they knew most of those impulses came from habit, not from reason. If you pay attention, you'll notice the same in yourself. How much of what you think each day is just repetition? The same quick reactions, the same emotional triggers, the same judgments running on autopilot. It feels efficient because it's fast, but in truth it only proves you're running on outdated software. And if you don't question it, you're letting the past decide your future. A Stoic would never accept that. They believed in resetting the mind like a farmer clears the field each morning before planting seeds. Imagine your mind as a vast forest. If you keep walking the same trail, you'll wear a smooth path. Easy to follow, but it leads nowhere new. To create a new path, you'll have to cut through trees, stumble, and clear brush. It will be uncomfortable, maybe even discouraging at times, but those paths, the unfamiliar questions, the hard truths, are where real intelligence begins. The wise are not those who have all the answers, but those who are unafraid to be without them. Intelligence isn't about the speed at which you process information. It's about depth, the ability to sit with an idea long enough to let it challenge you. It's about holding two opposing views in your mind without rushing to pick a side. It's about intentional silence, not because you have nothing to say, but because you're listening for something deeper. And you won't learn this through headlines or endless scrolling. You learn it by facing yourself. One of the core Stoic questions is, what am I in control of right now? On the surface, it sounds almost too simple. But if you sit with it, if you really live with that question, it opens up an entire world. It forces you to separate what belongs to you from what doesn't. And that separation is the beginning of wisdom. When you stop wasting your energy on what's beyond your reach, you free that energy to focus on what you can actually influence, your awareness, your choices, your responses. Wisdom, the Stoics taught, is built like a blacksmith forges steel, not through inspiration, but through rhythm. Strike after strike, day after day. Not every blow is perfect, but every one is necessary. Today you might read something difficult. Tomorrow you might write your thoughts about it. The next day you might carry that clarity into a conversation. This is how wisdom takes shape, not flashy, but lasting. And yes, some days will feel foggy. You'll think you're not progressing. That feeling is real. But here's the surprising part. On those murky days, your brain may actually be forming its deepest connections. Progress doesn't always show up in the mirror. Sometimes it only shows itself in how you handle hardship, how you pause before reacting, how you choose silence over impulse. Those are the real signs of intelligence taking root. A wiser decision, a calmer reaction, a moment when you choose silence over impulse. These are not small things. They're signals that wisdom is quietly taking root. Do a quick audit of your week. How many times did you ask a sincere question instead of jumping in with an answer? How often did you read something not to be entertained, but to stretch your mind past comfort? How many moments of silence came not from shyness, but from thinking? If your honest answer is not many, that's not failure, it's feedback. You don't need a revolution. You need 15 focused minutes a day. Read something hard. Write something honest. Challenge one old belief. Don't train to look brilliant. Train to be awake. The ancients didn't have a word for neuroplasticity, yet they grasped its essence. Wisdom is the product of repeated choice. Marcus Aurelius didn't become a wise emperor because life crowned him with wisdom. He forged it line by line in a private conversation with his own reason. That's what his meditations really are, not lofty theory, but a man keeping himself honest. You don't need anything grand to begin. Begin. Don't wait for wisdom to arrive. Like weather, forge it like a craftsperson. Your toolkit can be simple. A notebook, a pen, a passage, a question. That is enough to start reshaping a life. And when you start, be patient. No one becomes wise overnight, but anyone can become wiser today. One page read deeply. One paragraph wrestled with. One moment of deliberate silence in a heated conversation. Over time, you'll notice something subtle. It's not that you feel smarter in the flashy sense. It's that you're becoming less foolish, less reactive, less easily pulled off center. Humble progress, durable progress. That's the path the Stoics chose. Now that you've begun cultivating wisdom like a Stoic, what comes next? Return to one of the oldest and most powerful methods of sharpening the mind. Reading, but not passively. Read like someone learning to survive the chaos. Lesson 2. Read books the smartest way to get smarter. There's a hard truth most of us prefer to ignore. Much of what we skim today is forgotten by tomorrow. Not because our memories are broken, but because undigested inputs have nowhere to live. Minds don't retain what they never had time to live with. Reading, which we like to call intellectual, has quietly become a kind of shallow sampling. We nibble at ideas like a buffet, one bite here, one spoon there, leaving mentally full, yet strangely unfed. The problem isn't a shortage of books, it's a shortage of digestion. What we lack is the ability and the discipline to turn words into nourishment. For the Stoics, reading wasn't about collecting facts or stacking quotes. It was inner training, a quiet dialogue with serious minds, a mirror held up to one's own. The point wasn't to discover something brand new as much as to see, with painful clarity, what has always been inside you. Wisdom to them isn't poured in from the outside. It's a fire waiting to be lit. We tend to read in stages of life. The young often read to find definitive answers. Adults read to gather perspectives to strengthen their arguments. The seasoned, if they still read, do so to examine themselves. They read slowly. They pause often. They are not easily persuaded. When a sentence stirs something deep, they don't highlight it for show. They sit with it until understanding replaces excitement. Through the Stoic lens, intelligence is measured less by processing speed and more by depth of understanding. And depth cannot be reached by skimming the surface. One sentence from Marcus Aurelius, met at the right moment and lived with, can redirect a person's choices for years. But that requires a rare alertness, a calm, unhurried, humble mind willing to listen. The Stoic doesn't read to feel superior. They read to uncover blind spots. Every page is a mirror. Real wisdom begins when you can look into that mirror without flinching. People often ask, how can I read more effectively? That's the wrong question. Reading isn't a trick to optimize, it's a habit to nurture. We don't read to become clever. We read to stay grounded amid noise. Not to win debates, but to lose with grace. Not to avoid mistakes, but to rise from them without self-contempt. True wisdom rarely shines like a neon sign. It's quiet, warm, and noticeable only to those who are still enough to sense it. Modern science echoes what the ancients intuited. Deep reading, where you engage the text, link it to your experiences, run it through your values, and test it in action, changes the brain. But even without the science, you can feel the difference. Skimming leaves you restless. Deep reading leaves you rearranged. A simple Stoic reading protocol, 15 minutes. Read one difficult page slowly. If a line bites, stop. Write 3 sentences. What it means, where it applies, what it asks you to change. Do one small action in the next 24 hours. That tests the idea in real life. Read, write, do. That is how books become intelligence, and intelligence becomes character. Our brains aren't passive containers. They don't simply record information like a machine. They reshape themselves in response to what we feed them. The way you read doesn't just change what you know, it changes how you think. That's why 2 people can pick up the exact same book and walk away with completely different results. One comes out clearer, stronger, ready to act. The other feels momentarily smarter, but goes back to living the same old way. One reads to live, the other reads to impress. I once met a man in his 60s who lived in a modest little house on the edge of town. No television humming in the background, no endless scroll of notifications, no chaos of modern noise. Just a simple shelf with about 30 books, philosophy, history, poetry. I asked him why he didn't buy more. He smiled gently and said, "These are enough for a lifetime." Every time I return to them, I discover that it's not the books that have changed, it's me. That moment reshaped how I thought about reading. Wisdom isn't measured by the number of books you own or the speed with which you consume them. It's measured by how deeply those words seep into your life, how much they transform the way you see yourself and the world. But deep reading isn't easy. It demands patience, courage, and humility. It forces you to pause and admit, I still don't understand, even when you've read 100 pages. It makes you wrestle with yourself, your impatience, your obsession with finishing, your need to constantly make progress. Yet this very discomfort is where wisdom begins. Wise person isn't someone with quick answers. They're someone willing to ask better questions. So if you want reading to shape your mind, try this. Pick a short passage, close the book, and write what it stirred in you. Not a summary, not a highlight, your real response. Did it resonate with your experience? Did it clash with what you believe? Did it unsettle you? Why? These questions, repeated day after day, shape a mind that is clear, reflective, and deeply human. This is Stoic wisdom. It's not showy or competitive. It doesn't crave applause. It's quiet, humble, razor-sharp, and steady as stone. The real measure isn't how many books you've read, but how much of your life has changed because of them. That question can sting. It can make you uncomfortable. But discomfort is the muscle soreness of the mind. It signals growth. Without it, there is no true transformation. Deep reading always carries a little friction, the discomfort of being challenged, of confronting yourself, of realizing how many outdated beliefs you've been clinging to. Without that friction, your mind grows dull. With it, wisdom begins to glow. And here's the paradox. The more deeply you read, the less you look for new things to collect. You begin to strip away instead, to shed illusions, ego, and bias. Books stop being about accumulation and start becoming about release, letting go of what no longer serves you. That's when wisdom appears, not like fireworks, but like a lantern in the dark. Not flashy, just steady enough to guide your next step. But reading is only the warm-up. A book can open doors, stir awareness, and spark questions. Yet reflection alone isn't enough. To walk through those doors, you need action. You need to stumble, experiment, and learn by doing. Nothing accelerates this like learning a new skill, something that makes you awkward again, humble again, and sharper in every thought. Here's the irony of adulthood. We crave growth, yet we grow terrified of starting over. We long for clarity, but cling to the safety of what we already know. We call it stability, but the Stoics named it more honestly complacency. And complacency is the silent enemy of intelligence. Nothing dulls the mind faster than living on. Repeating the same habits, avoiding the discomfort of not knowing, refusing to learn simply because we fear looking clumsy. A sharp mind requires us to return again and again to the place of the beginner, to stumble, to make mistakes, to be humbled by newness. Intelligence is not forged by effortless wins, but by the awkwardness of learning. Your mind isn't a container to be filled. It's a living forest that grows thicker, richer, and more alive when watered with new experiences. And nothing nourishes it more than learning a new skill, especially one that doesn't immediately reward you, but forces you to confront your own limits. Stoicism was never about producing scholars who dazzled with trivia. It was about cultivating people humble enough to question their own minds. It is not that we don't learn because we are ignorant, the Stoics reminded. We remain ignorant because we think we've already learned enough. In today's world where information is endless and shallow, the lesson of not knowing has never been more valuable. When you commit to learning a skill outside your comfort zone, whether it's woodworking, painting, coding, or playing an instrument, you do more than keep your brain busy. You reshape the way you see. Interdisciplinary learning is transformative. A software engineer who studies philosophy doesn't just gain new talking points. He begins to question the deeper value behind the systems he builds. A marketer who studies psychology doesn't just read customer behavior better, she begins to spot emotional patterns in her own life. A chef who takes up photography may start with better food photos, but soon discovers how composition and color change the way we tell stories. This is the great payoff of learning beyond your lane. You stop seeing the world through a single lens. Life no longer divides into what I do and what doesn't concern me. Everything connects, and in that connection your intelligence multiplies. When you step beyond being merely skilled in one area, you begin to notice the hidden links across fields, the echoes between disciplines, the repeating patterns in everyday life, the principles that run beneath the surface of everything. This is real intelligence. It's not about memorizing more, it's about seeing deeper. But that path is demanding, and that's why most people quit before they've truly begun. They bump into confusion after a few days of effort and immediately label themselves not naturally gifted. They forget that the goal isn't mastery, it's practice. The Stoics never pursued learning for applause. They weren't chasing credentials or prestige. They learned because the act of learning itself was training for the mind. For them, every new skill was a mirror reflecting their own character. When you take on something unfamiliar, the struggle isn't just about the subject, it's about observing your inner response. Are you patient with yourself when progress is slow? Can you accept being clumsy at first? Will you persist even when no one praises or rewards you? In Stoic philosophy, intelligence is a kind of freedom, the freedom from fearing failure, from needing to excel immediately, and from the trap of only doing what you're already good at. Consider the example of learning an instrument. You sit at the piano, your fingers fumbling, the sounds harsh and unpolished. It's humbling, even embarrassing. Yet if you persist through that stage, what you build is far more than skill in music. You forge a mind that knows persistence, humility, and adaptability, qualities that carry into every corner of life. And isn't this the reality for many adults? They haven't learned anything new in years. They say they don't have time, yet somehow find hours each week for their phones. They insist they already have enough skills to get by, not realizing that their minds are quietly rusting from disuse. Mental stagnation doesn't announce itself loudly. It sneaks in. It creeps through the loss of curiosity, the avoidance of discomfort, the endless repetition of the familiar. Then one day, they realize their responses to life feel outdated, rigid, and slow. Stoicism offers a way to reverse this decline, not by chasing every new trend or by piling on career credentials, but by deliberately engaging with new learning. It doesn't have to be grand. Learn a new way to brew your morning coffee. Pick up a camera and notice light differently. Try solving puzzles, sketching poetry, or organizing your space in the Japanese style. The skill itself almost doesn't matter. What matters is the awakening. Any new endeavor can shake the dust off your mind. You will feel awkward. You will feel inadequate. But that discomfort is the sign you're alive, thinking freshly, and reaching into places you've never touched before. Intelligence doesn't grow by avoiding that awkwardness. It grows by sitting in it long enough to emerge on the other side. Leonardo da Vinci is the perfect reminder. He wasn't only a painter. He was an anatomist, an inventor, a scientist, even a designer of war machines. What set him apart wasn't just his range of skills, it was his endless curiosity. He didn't learn to perform for others. He learned because he hungered to understand. That hunger kept his mind wide open, flexible, and fertile. And the truth is, this kind of vibrant intelligence isn't reserved for the rare genius. Anyone can cultivate it if they're willing to start slow and stay curious. If you feel resistance reading this, a flicker inside saying, "That's not me," that's a good sign. That voice is your comfort zone talking. And while comfort isn't evil, it has never been where growth happens. You don't need to leap into a massive change. Just take a small action. 10 minutes of practice each day, learning something you've always postponed. Track your progress. Observe your reactions. Notice what stirs in you when you fail and when you persist. You may never become an expert. That doesn't matter. What matters is that you become sharper, clearer, more awake. Not because you know more facts, but because you see more connections. What once felt like an immovable wall will reveal itself as a door disguised by your own fear. You'll realize intelligence isn't a destination. It's a way of being shaped daily by the choices you make. When stepping outside your comfort zone becomes second nature, you begin to embody the next lesson, a true growth mindset. Not the shallow kind of positive thinking, but a deeper posture toward life, the willingness to live as a lifelong learner. And in a chaotic, unpredictable world, that posture brings a rare and steady peace, because beneath every thought, you have even the small ones you dismiss as random, lies a story you're telling yourself. That story quietly shapes how you interpret reality, how you react to setbacks, and how much of your potential you allow yourself to use. Two people face failure. One says, "I'm just not cut out for this." The other says, "This is still new to me." The reality is the same, but one interpretation shuts the door while the other opens it. Intelligence doesn't begin with facts. It begins with perception, with how you choose to interpret what happens to you. The Stoics called this the control of perception. You can't dictate external events, but you can always control the story you attach to them. This isn't denial. It's definition. Failing a test doesn't mean you're stupid. It means you haven't yet learned how that test works. A breakup doesn't mean you're unlovable. It means there's something to learn about love and letting go. By shifting the language you use to describe yourself, you don't just change your mindset. You reshape the very reality your brain is responding to. And this isn't just ancient philosophy dressed up in poetic words. Modern neuroscience now confirms it. Believe it or not, your brain doesn't care all that much about truth. It cares about repetition. It rewires itself according to the instructions you feed it, whether those instructions are empowering or destructive. If you keep telling yourself, "I'll never get this," your brain quietly accepts that as a command. It builds limits into your operating system, making the belief feel real. Think of your brain like software. Each time you describe yourself, "I'm terrible at math. I can't talk to people. I'm not the creative type," you're updating that code. The strange part is that most of us do this in the worst possible way, reinforcing limits instead of potential. No one needs to hold us back, punish us, or clip our wings. We do it ourselves by repeating the wrong instructions for years. Slowly, we become trapped inside a box we built and labeled with our own words. The real question isn't, how smart am I? But how much intelligence have I allowed myself to access? And the first barrier isn't ignorance, it's the crusted layers of rigid self-talk. Imagine your mind as a room lined with mirrors. If you fill that room with harsh, negative language, all you see reflected back are distortions, blurred versions of yourself, limited, hesitant, stuck. But if you begin to clean those mirrors with clear, constructive language, the reflection shifts. Suddenly you see possibility, flexibility, a self not yet finished, but ready to grow. The Stoics were not naive. They never claimed that positive thinking would magically erase pain. They weren't in the business of sugarcoating life. What they did know is that if you don't take ownership of your inner dialogue, it will own you. Consider something simple. You're criticized at work. If your first thought is, they hate me, I'm useless, your energy collapses, your intelligence shuts down, and you withdraw. But if instead you think, they're unhappy with my work, what can I improve? Your mind stays open, flexible, alive. Thought remains active. Intelligence stays online. Here's the irony. The people who are truly intelligent often don't feel particularly smart because they are constantly learning, constantly questioning. In contrast, those stuck in a fixed mindset are the ones most convinced they already know enough. The moment something new appears, they reject it because it threatens the fragile self-image they cling to. To them, intelligence is like a possession that must be defended, not a practice that must be exercised. The genuinely wise person doesn't guard their ego. They guard the truth. And because of that, they say different things to themselves. I don't know enough yet. There might be a better way. It's time to update my thinking. These phrases keep the mind elastic. They keep the door open. Much of our inner suffering comes not from circumstances, but from the refusal to adapt. Someone who tells themselves, I'm always impatient, I can't change, is building a prison with their own words, then locking themselves inside as both inmate and warden. But if that same person says, I'm learning to be more patient, they're not lying. They're opening a door. The words we choose are the first swing of the pickaxe, either to bury our potential or to release it. Modern psychology agrees. Albert Ellis, one of the 20th century's most influential psychologists, developed the ABC model to explain this. A stands for activating event, B for belief, and C for consequence. His point was simple but revolutionary. It's not A, the event, that creates C, the emotional response. It's B, the belief you attach in between. Two people can face the same rejection, the same failure, the same loss, but end up in completely different emotional places solely because of the story they told themselves about it. Take a familiar example. You don't get the job you wanted. That's event A. If your belief B is, I'm not good enough, the consequence C will be shame, despair, and giving up. But if your belief is, I need to sharpen my skills and try again, the consequence is determination, persistence, growth. Same event, two completely different outcomes. As the Stoics said long ago, it's not events that disturb us, it's our judgments about them. So the next time someone asks you, how can I become smarter? You won't point them to a long reading list or fancy memory tricks. You'll tell them, start by listening to how you talk to yourself. Adjust your words like recalibrating a compass. Because if you don't believe you can learn, no method will work. But if you keep your perspective flexible, always ready to shift and expand, everything you learn will take root. And like a muscle, this mindset needs training. Not once a year, not in big bursts, but through daily exercise. And here's the twist. These mental workouts aren't about solving puzzles or mastering 3 languages at once. The real workout is subtler. Each day, question one thing you've always assumed. Revisit one belief. Reframe one sentence of self-talk. Restructure one small habit of thought. Do that consistently, and you'll realize intelligence isn't a destination. It's a process. A daily practice of rebuilding yourself one thought at a time. Just as the body needs movement to stay strong, the mind needs its own kind of motion, not to impress others, but to remain sharp, nimble, and alive. And that brings us to the next lesson, the art of deliberate mental exercise, the small but relentless challenges that sharpen, not by talent, but by practice, by refining your perspective again and again, until clarity becomes your natural state. There's something you carry with you every day, yet you probably rarely stop to examine it. Your mind. You rely on it constantly, to think, to decide, to react, to plan, to interpret everything that happens around you. Nearly every experience you have filters through this one tool. But how often do you pause and ask, am I actually training it? Or am I just using it until it dulls? We spend enormous energy on our bodies, dieting, exercising, worrying about skincare, trying new supplements. But what about the mind? Do we treat it as something alive that can grow stronger, or as something that will slowly decay if left unattended? A friend once told me about his morning ritual. Each day he makes coffee in a deliberately mindful way, not because he's picky about beans or brewing methods, but because it's the one moment he reserves to think for himself. Which beans today? How much should I grind? Hot water or warm? These little decisions may seem trivial, but for him, they are an anchor. They guard a small corner of his mind from slipping into autopilot. He told me that when he begins the day with one intentional act, the entire day feels different, more alert, less irritable, less like he's just drifting. And that's the secret. Training your mind doesn't always require puzzles, logic games, or complicated exercises. Sometimes it's as simple as doing things differently. Brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand. Sit in a different chair at the dinner table. Ask someone close to you, what did you think about most today? And then truly listen without interrupting or judging. These small shifts all carry one principle. They disrupt autopilot. Stoicism rarely preaches this in flashy words, but it's one of its deepest truths. Live deliberately. Don't wait for the world to shake you awake. Don't wait for a crisis to force you into growth. Stoics don't sit around hoping adversity will make them stronger. They create small challenges for themselves because they know growth never comes when things are easy. They train their minds the way others train their bodies, quietly, consistently, without applause. The problem today is that modern life is very good at keeping us asleep. You don't need to memorize numbers. Your phone does that. You don't need to think through problems. There's always a video explicable. Why notice the scent of rain or the depth of silence when endless noise is always available? In a world where answers arrive instantly, we stop asking questions. And without questions, our minds slowly lose their edge. We stop noticing. We stop connecting. We stop thinking for ourselves. I once knew a man named Edward, a quiet software engineer who lived simply. He had a curious weekly ritual. He would choose something he didn't know how to do and practice it. One week he baked bread. Another he folded paper cranes. Another he practiced drawing circles and straight lines freehand. He wasn't trying to master anything. His goal was to stay uncomfortable enough to stay alive inside. He admitted he often grew frustrated at how bad he was at simple tasks. But strangely, that frustration carried a hidden satisfaction. He wasn't proud of failing, but proud of learning, proud of staying a beginner. As adults, the world gives us fewer and fewer chances to be beginners. If you don't deliberately create those chances, your mind begins to close like a book that's no longer read. As children, life is full of hurdles: tying shoelaces, memorizing multiplication, learning to ride a bike. Growth was unavoidable. But adulthood shifts into routine. We stop fumbling, stop failing, and eventually stop expanding. Intelligence doesn't die from mistakes. It dies from comfort. So if you want to keep your mind sharp, don't chase perfect exercises. Simply ask, did something confuse me today? If the answer is no, go find something that does. Read an idea that unsettles you. Write against a belief you've always held. Try an instrument you'll never master. Rewrite a favorite story from another character's perspective. Watch the expressions of your loved ones and guess what they might be feeling. These aren't random tasks. They're deliberate rebellions against mental stagnation. Sometimes you don't need to add more. You just need to do differently. So pause and reflect. In the last week, did you try anything that made you think, I might not be good at this? If not, you're missing one of the quietest, most powerful ways to stay sharp. That sharpness, this wakefulness, is the real foundation of intelligence. Not degrees, not accomplishments. Busyness doesn't equal engagement. A person rushing from meeting to meeting might be running on autopilot, while someone sitting quietly with a single idea might be training their mind more deeply than we realize. Mental exercise isn't a checklist. It's a way of living. It's a promise you make silently to yourself. I will not let my mind drift into numbness without resistance. And once you've trained yourself to stay this alert, you'll discover another layer of truth, knowledge. Alone is not enough. You must also know yourself. Many of our worst choices aren't born from ignorance, but from emotions hijacking reason before we notice. And that leads to the next essential lesson. Emotional intelligence is the foundation of true success, because intellect without insight is like a ship with a rudder but no sail, and the Stoic never lets the wind decide their direction. When you close your eyes and picture the smartest person you know, chances are the image that appears isn't of someone with the most degrees, the biggest vocabulary, or the fastest logic. More often, it's someone whose very presence makes you feel calmer. They rarely dominate conversations, but when they do speak, their words strike directly at the heart of the matter. They don't rush with the crowd. They don't flare up when challenged. In a room filled with tension, they're the one who lowers the temperature. That is intelligence, not the kind measured by test scores, but the kind measured by composure. The Stoics called this the wisdom of self-mastery. Today we call it emotional intelligence. And while the phrase is modern, the practice is ancient. For the Stoics, the highest form of rationality wasn't solving abstract problems, it was mastering yourself, especially in chaos. Losing control of your emotions to them wasn't just weakness. It was surrendering your greatest freedom, the freedom to choose your response. A friend of mine once told me a story from her job at a media company. One day, a major project was abruptly canceled because of a mistake her team made. The top boss was furious. In the meeting, he raised his voice, scolding people in front of everyone. The room froze. Some colleagues clenched their jaws. Others stayed silent, humiliated. My friend, usually outspoken, chose quiet that day. Number. Defensive words, no blame shifting, no justification. After the meeting, she calmly requested a private conversation. She admitted the mistake, explained what had gone wrong, and proposed a solution. A week later, the project was reinstated. Her boss later admitted it was her composure and honesty, not excuses, that changed his mind. That's emotional intelligence in action. And if you think about it, the most pain in our lives rarely comes from big crises. It comes from small, everyday moments. A cold glance, a careless comment, a bruised ego. How we react to these moments determines the quality of our days, even our lives. Daniel Goleman, who popularized the concept of emotional intelligence, outlined 5 core components. Look closely, and you'll see that each one echoes Stoic principles to 1. Self-awareness. The Stoics practice this daily through reflection and journaling. Not to vent, but to observe. What did I feel today? Where did it come from? Was it real or imagined? If you've never tried it, start small. Each night, write down one moment that bothered you. Ask yourself, what did I feel? How did I react? Did it help? That small habit gradually builds the light of awareness. 2. Self-regulation. Life is like a river. The Stoics didn't waste energy trying to control the current. They learned to swim in it. Every frustration presents a choice. Let your instincts drive you, or pause and decide who you want to be. Here's a practice. When anger strikes, don't send the message immediately. Write it down. Wait 10 minutes. Read it again. You'll probably see most of it was just raw emotion. That's the gap between reaction and reflection, the very gap where freedom lives. 3. Intrinsic motivation. The Stoics acted out of values, not applause. They asked, if no one saw me do this, would I still do it? When was the last time you did something difficult, unrecognized, yet felt proud simply because it was right? In a world addicted to likes and ratings, acting from inner drive is a radical kind of strength. Point 4. Empathy. Marcus Aurelius, though emperor of Rome, constantly reminded himself that people act not out of malice, but out of their perception of the world. No one chooses to be wrong. That perspective breeds compassion. A rude colleague may be grieving. A loved one's coldness might hide exhaustion you can't see, shifting from "why are they doing this to me" to "what might they be going through" transforms anger into understanding. That's intelligence no textbook can teach. 5. Social skill. This is not about pleasing people. It's about bringing steadiness into connection. The Stoics didn't argue to win. They argued to understand. They didn't speak often, but when they did, their words carried weight. Think of the calm voice. In a heated meeting, the one sentence that shifts the entire room. That's not manipulation. That's quiet mastery of self, expressed through relationship. Emotional intelligence isn't weakness. It's not softness. It's quiet strength, the kind of strength that allows a person to remain steady in storms, like a rock in rough waters. And in our time, where emotions are constantly manipulated by ads, social media, arguments, choosing to remain centered is an act of rebellion. That's how the Stoics lived. And it's something you can live to. So if you truly want to become smarter, begin here. Learn to feel without drowning. Learn to respond without reacting. Learn to understand others without losing yourself. None of this requires genius. It requires practice, daily practice. And once you begin, you'll realize what felt like weakness was actually the foundation of your deepest strength. And when emotional intelligence takes root, something remarkable happens. It's as if the brain itself unlocks. Your thoughts sharpen. Your decisions improve. You hear your inner voice with greater clarity. That's when it's time for the next lesson. To ask not only what ideas am I feeding my mind, but what fuel am I giving my body? Because your intellect, no matter how disciplined, still depends on your physical vessel. Ignore that and you'll see sharpness collapse into exhaustion, wisdom crumple under stress. Even the Stoics, who praised reason above all, knew this. We are one whole being. A sharp mind begins with something surprisingly unglamorous, but absolutely essential: how you eat. But how often do we stop and ask, what is this meal doing to my ability to think? Imagine this: you're about to sit down and map out a business plan or tackle a difficult philosophical text. Would you really expect your best work after slurping down a bowl of instant noodles with a sugary soda? Probably not. But what if instead you had a simple plate of steamed vegetables, a piece of salmon, a handful of walnuts, and water? The difference is striking. Your body feels lighter, your mind sharper, as if someone switched on the lights in a dimly lit room. We live in the so-called information age, yet ironically, many of us are starving our brains. Modern diets overflow with preservatives, chemicals, processed sugars, and empty calories, while lacking the nutrients that keep the mind clear. The result? A generation that is overstimulated, chronically tired, restless, and weighed down by anxiety. It makes perfect sense when you remember this. The brain is an energy-hungry machine, consuming more than 20% of our daily intake. Feed it garbage, and you get garbage output. Look back at Socrates. He didn't leave behind a single book, yet his presence, his calm walks, his frugal meals, and his way of turning conversations into art still echo through history. His wisdom didn't spring from thought alone. It came from the way he lived, including how he treated his body. The Stoics understood this clearly. You can't control the whole external world, but you can control what you choose to put into your body. That's why they saw self-mastery beginning at the table with the spoon. Today, modern science meets that ancient wisdom. Studies now show the undeniable link between what we eat and how we think, feel, and decide. Omega-3 south in fish strengthen neural connections. Probiotics in yogurt and kimchi regulate the gut-brain axis and serotonin, affecting mood and clarity. Coffee sharpens focus in moderation, but feeds anxiety in excess. Green tea, rich in L-theanine, calms the mind while keeping it alert. So why do we keep ignoring this? Maybe because it feels too ordinary. Eating is so routine that we stop questioning it. And that's exactly why it matters so much. You don't need to overhaul your life overnight. You just need to make breakfast tomorrow with intention. Each meal is a brick in the temple of your mind. Eat like the person you want to become. I once met a man in his 50s who had been studying philosophy for decades on his own. He told me, "I didn't truly understand Stoicism until I changed my breakfast." When I asked him why, he smiled. Because for the first time in years I could read Marcus Aurelius at 5 a.m. without dozing off. Sometimes the simplest changes unlock the deepest clarity. Wisdom, after all, isn't a state you achieve. It's a result. It's the sum of small choices repeated daily. Maybe you think, I don't have time to focus on food. But ask yourself, do you have time to operate with a foggy, sluggish brain? Do you really expect to solve your biggest challenges on the back of cheap fuel? You wouldn't pour soda into a car and expect it to run smoothly. Why treat your own brain with less respect? Stoicism is a philosophy of facing reality, not making excuses. And reality says this: if you want to think like someone strong, you must also eat like someone strong. And here's the beautiful surprise. When you start eating well, the benefits go far beyond sharper focus or more energy. You begin to feel responsible for yourself again. You sense control returning. You stop blaming your circumstances and start taking deliberate action. As Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And sometimes that reaction starts as simply as picking a better meal. So where do you begin? Not with harsh restriction, but with addition. Add a plate of greens to lunch. Add a handful of nuts instead of a packaged snack. Add a glass of water before your morning coffee. These little changes are more than nutritional. They're quiet acts of self-respect. And once your body feels the difference, lighter energy, clearer thoughts, calmer moods, you'll naturally lose the appetite for what drags you down. You won't need to force yourself to quit junk food. Your intuition will guide you away from it because you've tasted clarity. That awakening doesn't come from books. It comes from your body whispering, this is the right path. And nothing in Stoicism is clearer than this. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. It's no longer wanting what weakens you. As your body grows balanced, your mind sharpens. 2, not just becoming quicker, but becoming softer. You find yourself less reactive, less quick to anger, more willing to listen. And that is the moment when wisdom shifts outward. It's no longer only about understanding yourself, but also about understanding others. Wisdom stops being what you absorb and becomes how you connect. It grows in conversations and disagreements, in those moments when you choose silence over impulse. And that leads us to the next lesson, the art of conversation. Have you ever noticed that the most meaningful dialogues in your life weren't with those who simply agreed with you, but with those who asked why? Not to argue for the sake of winning, but to invite you into deeper thought. Real dialogue isn't about opposing for the sake of opposition. It's about seeking to understand. And in that rare moment when you pause, really listen, and admit to yourself, maybe I've never truly understood what I've been saying all this time, you step into the birthplace of wisdom. In an age where everyone is rushing to assert themselves, the person who dares to step back, to ask, to genuinely seek clarity, that person stands out. It is in that quiet, uncommon space that real intelligence begins to grow. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If anyone can refute me, show me I'm making a mistake or looking at things from the wrong perspective. I'll gladly change. It is the truth I'm after, and the truth never harmed anyone." The power of this statement doesn't lie in his role as emperor. It lies in his humility. The most powerful man of his time was still willing to admit he might be wrong. That humility is what Stoicism trains in us, not to turn a deaf ear to life, no matter how high we climb, but to treat every event, every disagreement, every word as raw material for sharpening reason, calming emotion, and refining judgment. Nothing accelerates that process more than debate, not the shallow internet shouting match, but the kind of conversation that lingers in your mind long after, leaving you thoughtful and changed. Imagine your intellect as an uncut gem, left alone in familiar loops and circles of agreement. It stays rough, shining only in your imagination. But when you expose it to disagreement, let it be cut, polished, shaped through challenge, real brilliance emerges. Think of the people you know who are truly thoughtful. They rarely rush to speak. They listen longer than others. They avoid grand declarations. And when they do speak, everyone listens. Why? Because their words come from disciplined thinking, forged through questions asked, beliefs challenged, and perspectives broadened. Here's a paradox. The smarter you are, the more you need people who disagree with you. Why? Because intelligent people are especially skilled at rationalizing. They can convince themselves they're right even when they're not. The only safeguard against this intellectual arrogance is someone brave enough to say, "I don't think so, and here's why." In a culture obsessed with believing in yourself, it's easy to forget that being questioned is a gift. Discomfort, though unpleasant, is the door to growth. The Stoic sees discomfort not as an insult, but as an invitation. When someone challenges you, instead of reacting defensively, you can ask, "What am I protecting? Is this belief true or just familiar?" The moment you stay calm instead of snapping back, the dialogue stops being a battle of egos and becomes a key unlocking truth for both sides. A real debate isn't "I'm right and you're wrong." It's "let's find what's more right." When the goal is truth instead of victory, two opposing voices can both walk away wiser. And this kind of dialogue doesn't only belong in universities or conferences. It's not reserved for intellectuals. True debate happens everywhere. At the dinner table, in the workplace, in a cafe with a friend. Every time you hear an opposing view, and instead of dismissing it, you ask, "Why do you think that?" You're training one of the most valuable mental muscles, the ability to tolerate uncertainty. Look at the workplace. It's often not the ones with all the right answers who rise. It's the ones who ask better questions, who don't fear being challenged, who invite feedback to test their assumptions. Jeff Bezos once said, "People who are right a lot listen a lot." They don't get it right because they're smarter, but because they listen, especially to what they don't want to hear. Ray Dalio, founder of the world's largest hedge fund, created a culture where employees are encouraged to challenge even him. Why? Because unchecked ideas are dangerous. Each challenge either strengthens the idea or breaks it apart. Both outcomes are valuable. Neuroscience supports this. When we hear opposing views but remain calm, the brain activates the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reason and analysis. But when we react defensively, the amygdala takes over the emotional center, shutting down learning. Debate, therefore, is more than communication. It is a high-level workout for the mind. And the best part? You don't need to wait for someone to challenge you. You can create this sharpening yourself. Read authors you disagree with. Step into environments where you're the minority perspective. Spend time with people whose beliefs or backgrounds differ from yours. Not to change your mind, but to expand it. Wisdom isn't found in stubbornly defending your truth. It's in recognizing the truth inside others. Proverbs 27:17 says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." It's not agreement. That sharpens its friction. A dull blade can't sharpen itself. It needs contact, tension, resistance. So does the mind. If you only ever surround yourself with echoes of your own beliefs, you'll never cut deeper into truth. Ask yourself, are you living in a bubble of agreement? Do you only read what confirms what you already think? When was the last time a conversation actually changed your mind? If it's been a while, it might be time to open the door. Not to lose yourself, but to grow. Start small. In the next week, pick one topic you and a friend disagree on. Sit down and talk. Don't aim to win. Don't aim to convert. Aim to understand. Ask more questions than you answer. And when you feel the urge to defend, pause. Try saying, "I never thought of it that way. Can you explain more?" You'll be surprised how quickly the conversation deepens and how your mind expands. If it feels uncomfortable, good. That's the point. Because discomfort, as the Stoics knew, is not the enemy. It's the catalyst for growth. Think about the moments that shaped you into someone stronger. They almost never happened on a peaceful afternoon with coffee and music in the background. Growth arrives through friction, failure, rejection, heartbreak, unexpected loss, even that unsettling emptiness in routine. The Stoics never glorified suffering, but they refused to run from it. They understood a fundamental truth. Breakthroughs are born not in comfort, but in the courage to stay with discomfort long enough to learn from it. Progress in thought always demands friction. No friction, no fire. No pressure, no diamonds. Yet most of us grow up conditioned to believe that if something feels uncomfortable, it must mean we're doing it wrong. Stress? Retreat. Failure? Tell ourselves, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Unease? Take it as a warning to stop. But the Stoics flipped that script. To them, those feelings weren't signals to turn back. They were invitations to step forward. Think of learning a new language. At the beginning, it feels overwhelming, strange. Sounds, tangled grammar, endless frustration. That's raw discomfort. But it's also the exact moment when the brain begins to carve new pathways, to build connections it has never built before. Confusion isn't proof of failure. It's proof that genuine learning is underway. The mind doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in chaos, an organized chaos that only persistence can eventually untangle. Neuroscientists today call this desirable. Difficulty. Challenge is hard enough to stretch us, but not so crushing that we shut down. You see this principle in physical training. Lift a weight slightly heavier than usual. Run one more lap. Push out 5 extra push-ups when your arms are trembling. Growth happens not in what you can already do, but in that trembling threshold where discomfort lives. Intellectual growth follows the same rule. It requires intensity. It requires stress, the kind that is intentional, not destructive. Marcus Aurelius, writing Meditations in the midst of war and illness, wasn't soothing himself. He was sharpening himself. Each page carries the same quiet resolution. If this is happening, then it needs to happen. If I am uncomfortable, then perhaps I am exactly where I need to be. The question for the Stoic was never, how do I escape this feeling? But how long can I sit with it, and what can I learn here? Imagine your boss harshly criticizes your work. Instinct reacts with defensiveness, shame, or anger. But if you practice Stoic awareness, you catch that impulse and instead ask, what is this discomfort revealing? Is it pointing out a blind spot I've ignored? That's when wisdom starts to stir. Not academic wisdom, but living wisdom, practical, usable, shaping you in real time. Or picture a heated conversation with someone who holds views opposite to yours. Walking away is easy. Shutting down is tempting. But if you stay, if you listen, without interrupting, sit in the unease of difference, you stretch. The conversation might still end in disagreement, but your mind will be wider than it was before. That stretch is uncomfortable, but it's vital. Here's the twist. The more mature and successful you become, the easier it is to avoid this discomfort. When you're young, you endure struggle because you're trying to prove yourself. But once you've built stability, the temptation is to settle into comfort reading only what you agree with, doing only what you're good at, surrounding yourself with people who won't challenge you. Slowly, the fire fades not because of age, but because of lack of friction. As Nassim Nicholas Taleb argues in Antifragile, things that truly endure chaos don't just survive it, they grow stronger because of it. Without complexity, the mind atrophies. Memory alone doesn't equal wisdom. True intelligence is the habit of questioning. Is this really true? Could there be another perspective? Is this emotion clouding my judgment or revealing something I need to address? Here's a simple but powerful exercise. At the end of each day, write down 3 moments that made you uncomfortable. Next to each one, ask, why did this trigger me? What might it be trying to teach me? 1 page a day. Do this for a month and you'll notice the change. Situations that once rattled you now leave you steady, even curious. That's not because you learned all the answers, but because you learned to ask better questions. Of course, not all discomfort is worth enduring. The Stoics never demanded blind suffering. If you're stuck in a toxic relationship or trapped in work that violates your deepest values, walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. The goal isn't to embrace pain for its own sake, but to distinguish which discomfort builds me and which one only breaks me. One teaches, the other drains. The ultimate question is this: can you stay a little longer in what unsettles you? Can you sit with it like a dark cloud overhead, knowing the sky behind it is still clear? Wisdom, like sunlight, doesn't shine instantly. It cuts slowly through the fog. And most of that fog is made from the very discomfort we keep running away from. When you finally train yourself to step into discomfort with awareness, you realize it was never punishment. It's a privilege. The privilege of growing not above others, but beyond who you were yesterday. Bit by bit, resistance becomes transformation. And when you understand this, another door opens. Wisdom isn't about how much you know, but about how much you are willing to change when tested. No one becomes truly wise without learning to sit with discomfort, because wisdom doesn't live only in the mind. It lives in the body, too, in the racing heartbeat, in the trembling legs, in the sweaty palms. Not just from exertion, but from fear. That's why the next lesson in sharpening your mind will never be found while sitting comfortably in an armchair. It begins when you stand up, step outside, and allow your body to join the training. The Stoics understood. You cannot elevate the spirit if you neglect the physical. Think of it like owning a high-end sports car, one that can rocket from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in seconds. But instead of maintaining it, changing the oil, rotating the tires, you leave it locked away in the garage. You take it out for a spin only once in a while, then let it gather dust again. No matter how expensive or powerful it is, neglect will ruin it. Over time, it rusts, breaks down, and loses everything that once made it special. The human mind is no different. If the mind is the engine, the body is the frame that supports it. When the body weakens, so does the clarity of thought. When the body is strong, the mind sharpens, becomes agile, resilient, creative. This isn't just a moral lesson, it's a biological fact. Seneca once wrote, "The body should be treated more rigorously, that it may not be disobedient to the mind." Not because the body is more important than the mind, but because a sharp mind cannot thrive inside a sluggish body. Modern science now proves what the Stoics sensed long ago. Exercise isn't just about muscles, it's medicine for the brain. Many people still imagine intellectual growth as reading, studying, analyzing activities confined to the head. But if you've ever gone for a morning jog, you know the truth. Your mind clears, stress dissolves, ideas flow. That's not magic. It's biology. Movement pumps oxygen to the brain, activates the hippocampus, the memory center, and floods your system with endorphins, natural antidepressants. Studies show people who exercise regularly have higher gray matter density in the regions responsible for decision-making and focus. In short, move more, think better. Even in cases of depression, research revealed that 16 weeks of moderate exercise, just 3 half-hour sessions a week, produced results comparable to antidepressants. 6 months later, those who kept exercising had the lowest relapse rates. These aren't just numbers, they're reminders. Instead of numbing yourself with a phone screen or a drink, try a 20-minute walk. Your body isn't asking for perfection. It's warning you that your mental edge is fading, and it knows the way back begins with a single step. Take Jack, a 38-year-old software engineer. Once an outstanding student admired for his grit, life slowly wore him down: deadlines, family, endless meetings. He still read books and enrolled in online courses, but the more he studied, the more burned out he felt. His memory slipped, his emotions frayed, his sharpness dulled. Then, in the middle of an office presentation, Jack froze. His mind went blank. Not a single word would come. Shaken, he drove not home, but to the gym, a place he hadn't visited in 3 years. That first week nearly broke him. He couldn't manage more than a handful of crunches. His heart raced after only minutes of jogging, but he kept coming back. After 3 weeks, it was as if he was waking from a long sleep. His sleep improved, his focus returned, ideas sparked. During AB workouts, after 2 months, colleagues barely recognized him. Jack wasn't just stronger, he had rebooted his mind. "I don't work out to burn fat anymore," he told me. "I work out to get my brain back." Neuroscience calls this neurogenesis, the creation of new brain cells. Yes, even the adult brain can grow, but it requires movement. Physical activity lowers cortisol, the stress hormone, and boosts endorphins, the chemicals of joy. A mind constantly drowned in cortisol cannot stay sharp. It wilts under stress, anxiety, and sleeplessness. You don't need to run a marathon. You need small, consistent habits. Walk briskly for 10 minutes before checking your phone in the morning. During work, stand up and stretch every 90 minutes. Step outside. Breathe. Think of movement as mental decluttering, like defragmenting a computer's hard drive. Within a week, you'll feel your focus sharpen, your energy rise, your memory retain more. The simplicity is deceptive. That's why many fail. They wait for motivation, not realizing motivation comes after action. Flip the script. Act first, the feeling will follow. You don't exercise because you're inspired. You feel inspired because you exercised. The Stoics knew this. Discipline creates freedom. So next time your mind feels heavy and dull, don't. Reach for another book or podcast. Step outside, run, do push-ups, skip rope. Remind yourself that you live inside this body, and neglecting it means losing control of the wheel. The body is not the burden of the soul. It is the vessel carrying it through life's storms. Care for it, and the mind you rely on will rise sharper, calmer, and more resilient than you ever imagined. Maybe you're listening to this while sitting in a cafe or scrolling in bed. That's fine, but before you go any further, pause. Stand up for 30 seconds. Stretch. Let the blood move through your body. Wake your frame, and you'll notice your mind wakes with it. And when the body wakes, the mind lights up not just for logic and analysis, but for something deeper, the quiet attunement to beauty that leads us to the next lesson. Creativity is sparked by the arts. A song can shift the course of a decision. A painting can open a door to a new way of thinking. A poem can soften your defenses when reason alone cannot. There is a kind of intelligence the modern world is in danger of forgetting. It isn't the sharp precision of test-taking or the rapid recall of data. It's the intelligence that appears in unnoticed moments when your heart stirs at a melody you've never heard before. When you find yourself frozen before a painting you don't fully understand, or when a line of poetry lingers inside you long after you've read it. Today's culture pushes us to run faster, be more efficient, measure everything, and explain everything. But true depth doesn't grow from spreadsheets or constant output. It grows in quiet spaces, the places too subtle for logic to enter, places where only art and music can reach. When Epictetus reminded us, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we may listen twice as much as we speak," he wasn't just talking about conversations. He was pointing toward a deeper receptivity, a state of openness. Art doesn't ask you to perform, it asks you to be still, to listen without judgment, to receive without needing to explain. And it's in that stillness that the mind reorganizes itself. Creativity doesn't thrive under military-style discipline. The harder you force it, the more it hides. But when you release control, when you doodle, hum a tune, let your hand play with color, or your fingers stumble over unfamiliar notes, ideas begin to surface. Thoughts connect. Emotions find shape. It's like soil left untouched that suddenly sprouts green shoots when the rain returns. Neuroscience even affirms this. Listening to music, especially complex or instrumental genres, lights up regions of the brain tied to memory, creativity, and emotion. It doesn't just relax you, it reorganizes you. Like cleaning a cluttered room, it frees space for clarity. Think of the times you've wrestled with a problem for hours with no answer, only to find the solution arriving when you stepped outside, caught a song, or paused to watch the sunset. That's the subtle power of art. It doesn't hand you the answer, but it clears the fog so the answer can appear. Yet we live in a world obsessed with productivity. Every second must add value. That's why painting, music, or simply watching clouds drift by are often dismissed as luxuries, even as pointless. But the Stoics knew, and great thinkers across history confirmed, that these so-called luxuries are often where wisdom hides. Real intelligence is not about winning debates or collecting facts. It's the lived intelligence that knows when to pause, when to listen, when to yield, and when to confront. Consider Winston Churchill. Known for his razor-sharp leadership during World War II, he painted almost every day. Not to sell, not to exhibit, but to meditate. He once wrote, "Painting is complete as a distraction. I know of nothing which, without exhausting the body, more entirely absorbs the mind." Or Einstein, who turned to his violin when physics problems felt unsolvable. For him, music wasn't background noise, it was the reset button. He wasn't chasing solutions, yet solutions often appeared. You don't have to be Churchill or Einstein to experience this. You only have to let art in. Let your hand follow color on a page. Let your ears be filled with sounds you don't usually listen to. Let your mind rest without shutting down. Art won't always answer how, but it will help you ask why. And the question, why, is the foundation of all deeper intelligence. Think of your mind as a garden. Knowledge is the soil, but art is the rain. Quiet, steady, drop by drop, it softens the ground, makes roots breathe easier, and allows hidden seeds to grow. The question is, are you letting that rain fall, or are you shielding yourself with the armor of productivity, afraid of wasting time? You don't have to understand art. You only have to let it be near. Maybe it's a strange jazz track at night, an oil painting hanging quietly in your living room, or a book of poetry whose meaning escapes you, yet comforts you anyway. Intelligence isn't only measured by how much you can explain. It's also shaped by how soft you allow your heart to become. And here's the paradox. When you engage with beauty, music, poetry, painting, dance, you begin to see intelligence less as something to display and more as something to live with day by day. Intelligence isn't a spotlight you shine in other people's faces. It's a candle you carry within. A purely rational mind can land on the correct answer, but only a soul attuned to beauty can choose the humane one. You've probably noticed this. Try applying knowledge when your mind is overloaded and it slips through your fingers. Yet, after a concert, a quiet painting session, or simply sitting with music in the dark, ideas settle into place, not because your brain got upgraded, but because you returned it to balance. Not all logic, not all emotion-centered. That's where real intelligence lives. If you're just beginning, start small. You don't need galleries or concert halls. Play a new piece of music each day, something outside your usual taste. Listen, not to like, but to feel. Or take a blank page and add color. No shapes, no rules, no need for it to be pretty, only honest. Notice how your attention shifts when there's no pressure to produce, only permission to notice. Maybe you feel stillness, maybe memory, maybe tears. All are welcome. Art doesn't promise a cure. What it promises is an open door. And if you wonder, does this actually make me smarter? Remember, a mind that can be still, that can feel, and listen to itself, is a mind that's difficult to manipulate. A mind like that can face pressure without collapsing. In the Stoic view, that is a higher form of intelligence. Once you open yourself to beauty, something else happens. Every skill, every lesson, every piece of knowledge becomes easier to absorb because you're no longer learning through resistance, but through harmony, which is why the next step, application, stops feeling like a chore and starts to flow. When the mind is quiet, action follows. People say wisdom is light in the darkness, but light alone is useless if you only stare at it and never take a step. Learning without applying is like stockpiling torches in a warehouse. Plenty of flame, zero illumination on the path. Stoicism doesn't care how much you know. It cares how much you live. Wisdom isn't on the page. It appears in how you respond when plans shatter, how you absorb an insult, how you stay steady when your inner world is screaming. Epictetus put it bluntly. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. That isn't a gentle suggestion, it's a wake-up call. Many of us have binged self-help videos, highlighted quotes, nodded along to big ideas, and changed nothing. We live in an age where consuming knowledge is its own addiction. Each aha releases dopamine, which feels like progress. But it's a mirage. The more you learn without doing, the wiser you feel, and the farther you drift from real transformation. Your mind isn't a storage unit. It's a muscle. If you don't use it in action, it atrophies. Neuroscience shows that when you only read and never practice, the circuits for planning and behavior barely light up. Information accumulates, self-command does not. Real intelligence isn't how much you store, it's how you steer. Think of a child learning to ride a bike. Balance can't be downloaded. It has to be felt. They wobble, fall, tremble, try again. Through sensation and repetition, the body learns what words can't teach. Patience is the same. You don't learn it by reading about it. You learn it standing in a long line, late for an appointment, and choosing not to explode. Pause here. How many things do you know well that you still don't do? You know you should sleep earlier, yet you scroll past midnight. You know exercise matters, yet you postpone. The problem isn't ignorance. It's the gap between intellect and action. Stoicism is the bridge. Consider an ordinary story. James, 35, an IT engineer, starts each morning with a few pages of Stoic philosophy. He underlines Marcus and Seneca, journals 3 principles: focus on what you can control, stay calm in adversity, be grateful for the present. On paper, he understands. In life, every meeting with his interrupting, hypercritical boss sends him home seething, and his family gets the leftovers of that anger. The wisdom stays in the book. After one especially harsh meeting, a colleague pulled him aside. "Seeing how you reacted, I'm starting to question your wisdom." It wasn't the boss's criticism that pierced him. It was the mirror. James realized he didn't lack insight. He lacked embodiment. So at the next meeting, when the interruptions came, he didn't defend or escalate. He took notes, asked for specifics, clarified expectations, ended with a quiet thank you. No applause followed, no grand victory. But he knew silently he had rewritten a line of Marcus, not in ink, in action. So how do you begin living what you learned today? Try a no-frills method. Learn one, do one. After each new idea from a book, podcast, or video, pause and ask, where can I apply this today? Not next month. Not when conditions are perfect. Today. Read about gratitude. Call someone and tell them what they mean to you. Study discipline. Make your bed and keep a promise to yourself. Learn about focus. Disable notifications for the next 2 hours. The action doesn't need to be big. It needs to be real. Soon, you'll notice that intelligence isn't measured by eloquent explanations, but by your behavior under pressure. Whether you keep your word, whether you can absorb criticism without collapsing, whether you know when to speak and when to stay silent. Wisdom isn't the flame you show the world. It's the quiet heat that keeps you warm when life turns cold. Remember, the Stoics didn't seek knowledge to shine. They sought knowledge to live with integrity, resilience, and dignity. If you want real wisdom, don't read another chapter. Live a single line you've already underlined. Worried about getting it wrong? There is no wrong in sincere practice. Mistakes give your knowledge a heartbeat. Only through action can you discover what fits, what needs adjusting. The person who never errs is the person who never began. To a Stoic, courage in living is the truest measure of wisdom. And once you're on this path, you'll discover that truth doesn't live in slogans. It lives in those decisive moments when you choose restraint over rage, action over avoidance, and what's right over what's easy. Do that even once, and you are already wiser than the one who only talks philosophy. Having begun, you're ready for the next level, not just applying, but questioning. Because action alone isn't enough. It must be the right action. For that, you have to interrogate your assumptions, even the ones that sound noble. Especially now when every swipe floods you with opinions. The danger isn't mere ignorance, it's confidence in the wrong things. Everyone thinks so has never been a guarantee of truth. If there's one lesson the Stoics never tired of repeating, it's this. Before you accept anything as true, question it. Interrogate it. Refuse the lazy habit of swallowing ideas whole without chewing them first. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." A crowd doesn't equal wisdom. Repetition doesn't make something true, and this isn't just an academic warning. It's a matter of survival for anyone who wants to keep their mind sharp in a world where truth is constantly stretched, twisted, and packaged for consumption. Think about it. When was the last time you shared an article without checking the source? Or repeated a claim at dinner just because it sounded right? We don't do this because we're foolish. We do it because the human mind takes shortcuts. We trust what feels familiar, not what's accurate. Psychologists call this confirmation bias, our tendency to chase what supports our beliefs and to ignore what doesn't. But Stoicism reminds us, rational doubt isn't cynicism, it's courage. The courage to admit we might be wrong. The courage to recognize that truth doesn't always feel comfortable. In fact, the deepest truths often sting before they heal. In a noisy world, independent thinking, the ability to question not only others, but also ourselves is the highest form of intellectual freedom. History offers vivid warnings. In the Bible, the crowd demanded the crucifixion of Jesus, not because they understood, but because they followed the herd. Pontius Pilate, who knew better, washed his hands. "I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See thee to it." His silence, his refusal to resist the mob, became the greater sin. And that should haunt us. How often today do we wash our hands by sharing unchecked headlines, parroting slogans, or repeating groupthink because it's easier than standing alone? If wisdom is a flame, then blind faith is the wind that can extinguish it. Blind belief, whether in politics, religion, science, or media, becomes a form of slavery. A free person isn't the one who knows the most, but the one who knows how to ask the right questions. So how do you train this habit? The Stoics leaned on a technique we now call Socratic questioning. The method is simple. When you encounter a claim, ask who is saying this. What do they gain if I believe it? Is this evidence or emotion? Is there a credible counterargument? What if I'm wrong? These questions don't need to be grand rituals. They can begin in small, everyday moments. If someone says eating after 8 p.m. makes you fat, don't just nod. Ask, what research shows that? Under what conditions is it true? Nutrition science tells us it's calorie intake and activity that matter most, not the clock. Yet confident delivery often drowns out correct content. Confidence is not the truth. The danger of not asking questions isn't simply that you'll believe falsehoods. The greater danger is that over time you'll lose the very ability to tell truth from falsehood. A blade that's never sharpened becomes dull. A mind that's never challenged becomes weak. Ironically, the more educated we are, the more likely we are to fall into the illusion of knowledge. We think we already know enough, so we stop checking. But wisdom hides in paradox. The smarter you are, the more you must question yourself, because you're more likely to be tricked by your own cleverness. The brain is like a curved mirror. It bends reality to fit our old beliefs. Ask yourself, am I believing this because it's true or because it makes me feel safe? Real beliefs don't fear scrutiny. Beliefs that collapse under questioning were never sturdy to begin with. If you find yourself getting angry or defensive the moment someone challenges you, chances are you're not holding the belief, it's holding you. Try this exercise. Every day, write down one thing you believe is true, and spend 10 minutes arguing against it, as if you were a lawyer. Do this daily, and you'll soon find yourself discarding shallow assumptions and keeping only the truths that can withstand fire. Pause for a moment right now. Think back on this week. Did you repeat something you hadn't checked? A headline? A quote? A statistic? If so, you're not alone. But you do have the power to stop the cycle. Because the real danger isn't living in a world of lies, it's becoming so used to them that you no longer notice. Intelligence isn't about hoarding answers. It's about asking better questions. Critical thinking isn't a luxury for philosophers. It's a basic safety tool, like a helmet on a busy road. You don't wear it because you expect an accident, but because you know no one is immune. Never underestimate your own capacity to be wrong. Once you build the habit of questioning before believing, something profound happens. You stop fearing change. You stop being obsessed with being right. Instead, you fall in love with the truth, even when it bruises your ego. That the Stoics called inner freedom, when you're no longer swayed by the winds of popular opinion, but anchored by reason and honesty. And that naturally raises the final, deeper question. If I can challenge the world around me, then what? Within myself have I never questioned? Could I be acting out old mental habits and mistaking them for my identity? That is the next frontier, the courage not only to doubt the world, but to doubt the stories we tell ourselves. Recognizing unconscious thought patterns, the ones that feel like you, but are often just echoes of the past, is one of the hardest, yet most liberating steps you can take. Have you ever noticed yourself suddenly angry, anxious, or overthinking without even knowing why? A burst of irritation, a snap judgment, a bias that seems to appear out of nowhere. The truth is, these reactions aren't random. They're deeply rooted. They've been shaped over years by environment, culture, media, and childhood memories. Each repeated experience carves trails in the brain, just like paths in a forest. The more you walk them, the deeper they become. Eventually, you don't even notice you're on them. Neuroscientists call this default mode thinking, the brain's way of running on autopilot to conserve energy. For our ancestors, it was survival, spotting predator tracks, reacting to rustling leaves. But in modern life, it often traps us in outdated, irrational, and even harmful ways of thinking. Consider someone raised under constant criticism. They may carry into adulthood an inner voice that whispers, "You're not good enough." Even as an accomplished professional, that belief creeps back whenever they try something new. Don't bother. You'll fail anyway. The cruel part? That voice doesn't sound like a belief. It feels like truth. This is where Stoic philosophy becomes powerful. Epictetus said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them. It's not the event that causes suffering. It's the unexamined interpretation. And if those interpretations are left unchecked, they become invisible software, silently shaping our emotions, our choices, our destinies. So how do we uncover these unconscious scripts? Imagine your mind as a room that hasn't been cleaned. For years, cluttered thoughts, hidden fears, forgotten beliefs piled in the corners. The task isn't to scrub it spotless all at once. It's simply to switch on the light. Every time you feel a sharp emotion, irritation, jealousy, insecurity, pause and ask, where is this coming from? Who planted this in me? Is this truly mine? That moment of pause is clarity. Daniel Kahneman, Nobel-winning psychologist, described. This is shifting from System 1, fast, automatic, emotional, to System 2, slow, deliberate, thoughtful. In that pause, you take the wheel back from autopilot. Try it with procrastination. Instead of calling yourself lazy, ask, what am I afraid of? Failure? Judgment? Responsibility if I succeed? By naming the fear, you begin to rewire the belief. Beneath it, think of the identities we recite without question. I'm not a math person. I don't have a business mind. I can't live without a partner. These aren't facts. They're scripts, programs repeated until they feel permanent. Remember, you're not a finished product. You're software, and software can be updated. Your thinking isn't a completed house. It's a construction site, always in progress. If you don't design it consciously, the world will do it for you, and it will use cheap materials. Carol Dweck's famous research on growth mindset showed this clearly. Children praised for effort rather than talent developed resilience. They dared to fail, to try again. But children praised only for being smart often crumbled after failure. They mistook one setback for proof of worthlessness. That's the danger of a fixed mindset, a prison disguised as identity. Here's the liberating part. You don't need to erase every unconscious pattern. Simply recognizing them is enough. Awareness alone is powerful. It makes the invisible visible, transforms the automatic into a choice. That's where real intelligence begins, with the humility to admit, I didn't know. Ask yourself, how many of your life's biggest decisions, what to study, who to love, what career to pursue were truly yours, and how many were echoes of someone else's script? Parents' expectations, cultural norms, the media's definitions. Oh, success? Awareness means you stop mistaking old programming for destiny. So the next time you catch yourself snapping, avoiding, or self-sabotaging, pause, take a breath, name the pattern, then try something different just once. That single breath, that crack of awareness, is the beginning of freedom. We can't control the outside world, but we can control how we meet it. And all control begins with self-observation, not with judgment, but with clarity. You can't steer a ship if you don't know where it's drifting. When you see your habits not as eternal truths, but as learned patterns, you realize something extraordinary. If they were learned, they can be unlearned. They can be replaced. That's the beginning of true intelligence, not in the quantity of knowledge you hold, but in the depth of your reflection and the courage to rewrite your inner code. If you followed along this far, you've already crossed a threshold many never reach, the doorway of awareness. And once you've stepped through, you're no longer a prisoner of invisible scripts. You've become the observer, the one who sees. And from seeing, real change begins. And from this vantage point, a final truth emerges. If the mind can be programmed, then it can also be reprogrammed. If your limits were learned, they can be unlearned. And right now you stand at the edge of a turning point, not through abstract theory, but through lived experience. you can change. Not everyone believes that, but those who've pierced the fog of unconscious thought know transformation never begins with results. It begins with the quiet, stubborn belief that change is possible. The tragedy is that most of us live as though we're finished products packaged, labeled and filed away by early judgments. This person is smart. That one is talented at math. Me? I'm just average. Yet when you look closer, you see how shallow these labels are. They're often born from random failures, careless remarks, or early experiences that had little to do with who we really are. And over time, we mistake them for truth. The Stoics warned us about this danger with their clear-eyed realism. If you believe you cannot change, that belief alone becomes the prison. No guard is needed. You lock the door from the inside. Labels like fate, personality, that's just who I am become mental recliners where the lazy mind collapses, avoiding the work of growth. But Stoicism rejects those recliners. It believes in feet, in forward motion. It teaches us we are not born to be fixed. We are born to become again and again. Wisdom isn't an inheritance. It's a practice, a habit carved day by day like flowing water etching a canyon. Intelligence is not a score, but a depth, a willingness to dive beneath the surface of experience, where emotions become signals rather than explosions, and curiosity becomes the antidote to fear. But before you can learn from reality, you must first believe that you can. That belief is not naive optimism. It is a choice, a philosophical stance, the decision to see yourself as a being capable of reinvention through reason and deliberate action. Look at your own life. How many of your realistic limits are nothing more than outdated judgments? A teenager fails one physics test and carries the label, "I'm bad at science," for decades. That's not destiny. That's a fossilized belief. And like all fossils, it can be shattered if you have the courage to strike it. Modern behavioral science supports this. Human beings aren't disconnected bundles of thoughts, feelings, and actions. We are dynamic systems, always adapting, always adjusting. Research on behavioral systems shows that even a small, well-placed change, if repeated consistently, can ripple across your whole life. Start with a 10-minute morning walk. That leads to earlier sleep, healthier meals, clearer mornings, better focus at work. A single small gear can set the entire machine into motion. Change doesn't demand a dramatic overhaul. It begins with one small act, done consistently, just as the Stoics trained themselves through quiet, daily choices. Think of yourself as driftwood in a river. The current society, family, circumstance pushes you where it will. If you stay passive, you drift. But the moment you believe you can change, you become a swimmer. You may not be fast. You may be exhausted. But with every kick, you reclaim direction. That single choice to resist the current is the essence of freedom. One of the most common mistakes we make is believing we must be good at something before we begin. Stoicism flips this on its head. Begin and you will become good in the process. True intelligence is not a storehouse of right answers. It's the character to stay with questions, to be patient without quitting, to be wrong without collapsing, to feel discouraged and yet keep going. I once met a man who worked as a security guard at a library. Every day he stood at the door, scanning visitors. But what struck me was that he always carried one book per week. One day I asked him, "Why do you read so much?" He smiled and replied, half joking but fully sincere, "Because I don't want to be a guard inside my own mind." That sentence has stayed with me. Our greatest enemy isn't the outside world. It's the limits we guard within ourselves. If all you learn to do is defend your comfort zone, you'll never learn to unlock it. Ask yourself, are you guarding yourself right now? Standing at the gate of your own mind, turning away new ideas, rejecting hard questions because of fear? Because if you are, then you've allowed fear to script the rest of your story. Believing in your capacity to change doesn't mean you'll improve every day without fail. It doesn't mean perfection. It means you trust that no matter how many times you stumble, you can still take another step. That belief itself is the foundation stone of Stoic intelligence, the unshakable conviction that you are not done yet. There will be days when you slip backward, months where progress feels stalled, even years where change seems invisible. But don't mistake silence for absence. Real growth rarely arrives with fanfare. It moves like water soaking into stone, unseen at first, but gradually shaping everything it touches. What matters most is not how dramatic your progress looks, but whether you continue to make space for it, even in the smallest ways. Don't measure your intelligence by grades, titles, or how loudly people listen when you speak. Measure it by how often you quietly outgrow the person you used to be. The truth is, none of us were born smart. We were born with the capacity to become wise. That's both a privilege and a responsibility. Leave that capacity untrained, and it rusts like a blade forgotten in the rain. Hone it daily, and it becomes a tool no storm can break. At the end of the day, you face a choice. Will you live as a framed snapshot of your past shaped by old judgments and fossilized beliefs? Or will you live as a work in progress, a manuscript, still being written line by line? If you choose the latter, you'll see that every small decision rewrites who you are. And here's the liberating truth. No one else can make that choice for you, but no one can take it away either. To be human is to change. We weren't born to be flawless. We were born to keep growing. The beauty of an intellectual and spiritual journey isn't measured by the quantity of what you know, but by how many times you have allowed yourself to be renewed. In a world obsessed with proving itself, perhaps the wisest thing you can do is this: slow down, listen, and learn to understand yourself a little more deeply. So if you're doubting yourself, feeling inadequate, or convinced you've reached your limit, remember, you are not done. None of us are final drafts. Every day is still a blank page. Tomorrow's chapter hasn't been written yet, and the pen is still in your hand. Together, we've just walked through 15 Stoic lessons designed not to inflate your ego with abstract knowledge, but to sharpen your clarity, strengthen your resilience, and anchor your purpose. These lessons aren't museum relics. They are tools forged in fire, meant to be used. You've learned that intelligence isn't a lottery ticket handed out at birth. It's something you shape through choice and practice. That reading isn't just about collecting words. It's about digesting them until they transform your actions. That every new skill is more than a credential. It's evidence you're still alive, still growing. You've seen how a growth mindset breathes life into every setback, while a fixed mindset suffocates potential. You've learned that unmastered emotions will eventually master you, that what you put on your plate affects not just your body, but the clarity of your thoughts. That real dialogue, whether with others or within yourself, can bruise your certainty, but sharpen your wisdom. That discomfort isn't an obstacle to avoid, but the very place where transformation begins. You've seen that when the body is trained, the mind sharpens with it. That when art enters the soul, creativity awakens in silence. That when knowledge is lived, not just studied, it becomes strength. That when you dare to question instead of blindly accepting, you reclaim your freedom. That when you finally see your automatic thoughts for what they are, scripts, not destiny, you begin to break invisible chains. And ultimately, you've seen that when you truly believe you can change, everything opens. These 15 lessons are not just ideas, they are keys. Each one unlocks a door within you to deeper clarity, stronger resilience, and a wiser, freer version of yourself. If something stirred in you during this journey, an insight, a conviction, or even just a quiet sense of possibility, mark this moment. If you haven't yet, hit that like button as your own declaration. I'm ready to keep growing. And if you want to walk further with us toward ideas that may not just inform you, but transform the way you live each minute, subscribe. Now, what's coming next isn't meant to entertain you or fill empty time. It's meant to equip you with the strength to live with greater clarity, courage, and calm. Thank you for choosing to walk this path alongside us. The journey isn't over. It's only beginning. I'll see you on the next step. Now I'd love to hear from you. Which of the 15 Stoic lessons in this journey speaks to you the most right now? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to go deeper, explore our StoicCraft playlist designed to help you strengthen your mind, guard your peace, and keep growing every day.